From Ticker, you're watching She's the Boss. Here's Jules Brooke.
Hi and welcome to She's the Boss, the show all about female founders and women doing great things in business. My name's Jules Brooke and today I have two really interesting guests. Both are amazing women doing incredible things. We have Kendall from Indie Labs and Cloud Peeps, and I want to hear all about what she's up to. And then we have Simone McEwen from the Sanctuary Refuge for Women, Children and Pets up in Queensland, which is very topical when we know the awful thing that's happened in the last week. But also I want to talk to her about how she got into that and also how she is funding it. So, and I also have a fantastic sponsor that I have to thank. Havana Home make beautiful fragrances and candles and have very generously sponsored the show. But anyway, girls, I am so glad that you're here and you're in such different fields. This is going to be a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. But first, let me start with you, Kate. Can you tell me a little bit about what Indie Labs is and why you're doing it? And Cloud Peeps and everything else you're doing, because you've actually got a whole long list on LinkedIn anyway.
Part of it is that I was creating tech companies for the past kind of decade, and since
what
being
do you mean tech companies?
So it's just a tech startups, I guess, a lot of people, but I say the word tech.
But you've been starting them?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, so, and we can get more into that as well, but the reason why I'm doing Indie Labs, which is a kind of amalgamation of different products and services that are launched out of there, and it has a conference called IndieConf and also Adder Accelerator, which is for female founders.
Oh, really? I'm loving this.
But the reason I started that is because I went through this whole journey, raised $1 million for my company Cloud Peeps, was in Silicon Valley in New York, and felt that there was only one way to be successful, which is the growth at all cost model, which is kind of what you see with the Uber generation, which is raise as much money, grow. It's not really pausing to think about, the welfare of team members, users, things like that. So that's why I've been really going on about the Indie Way, which I think is a more mindful way to create tech startups.
So what is the Indie Way?
Well, there's numerous things that I point into the Indie Way, but it's that you don't always need as much capital as possible to become a great global business, and that you don't need to hire as many people as possible to build that. So
this is a refreshing change.
Well, it is.
and probably a slightly female way of looking at things, definitely. I think, as well.
And part of that is through my journey, because I have a 6-month-old now, but I was told repeatedly by investors that, don't have a company or you won't be able to do it and have a family. So it was just kind of this pathway where I was like, if I want to create tech products and I want to create global businesses but also have a family, where does that leave me?
Which is really interesting, because I would have thought that technology allows us to be able to do both. I mean, much more so than 20 years ago when you couldn't do both.
But there's a whole history of female founders receiving less funding, all this, and women in tech. Discrimination. So it was definitely my experience that that it's changed a lot now, but starting out there was this view that this is
okay. So Indie Labs is kind of a conglomerate where you help people grow but also avoid that kind of snap thing of let me just get loads of money and I'll do an MBA, get a couple of $1 million, start something, trash and burn everyone around me, make a whole lot of money, walk away.
You're exactly right, and that's a lot more eloquent, but that's basically what I'm trying to do.
And then, so what's Cloud Peeps?
Well, Cloud Peeps was the company that I started, which was going after investor money, growth at all costs, and it's a freelance marketplace, a little bit like an Upwork or a freelancer.com, but for quality professionals. So it's much
who work in the cloud.
Yeah, well, yes, and then mostly around marketing, communications, social media, PR, things like that. So a curated talent marketplace.
Because we have to say, and we were talking about it before, I have known your name, Kate Kendall, forever, and we realised that our first contact was back when I started my PR company, which was like 2003.
Yep.
And you were the editor of Marketing Magazine, so that's been quite an interesting journey.
Yeah, definitely.
Which we will. Now I'll just find out a bit about Simone, and then we'll come back and find out more. So, Simone, welcome.
Thanks, Jules. Thanks for having me here.
It's so great to have you here. I am one of your biggest fans. I love everything that you do. But first, let's tell everyone what it is that you do. What is the Sanctuary Refuge for Women, Children and Pets?
Yeah, I started it up 4 years ago, and it was my dream for 20 years to do a refuge for women escaping domestic violence. But I didn't want it to just be a normal refuge in the burbs where you couldn't have lots of pets. So that was my dream.
Because it's in the Gold Coast, is it in the hinterland? I don't even know the Gold Coast that well, but I know that I've seen loads of photos of you with, is it a macaw that you have on your shoulder, and all the pets around, which is such a beautiful idea. But there's another thing that has particularly resonated with me, and you know what it is. So tell people how you're different.
Yeah, what makes us different is the women can bring their pets, but they can also bring boys over 12, which that's my passion.
It just blows my mind as a mother of 3 boys that there are refuges where women are escaping a violent or an awful situation. They've got boys who are, maybe they've got one who's 11 and one who's 13, and I've got twins, so when I met you, mine were 12, so it was very pertinent. Where do they go if you can't go to it? So the deal is, for anyone who doesn't know, that the government will not fund refuges if you take boys over 12. Is that correct?
It's been a problem for us to try and get funding. We have not got funding as yet, and we've been going for 4 years. I left my job after 6 months thinking we'll get funding really quick. Well, that was just crazy dreams that haven't come forward. Yet.
We're working on it.
We are.
But yeah, so what, when you say, so what are you actually doing? So you've got this house. Is it one house? Is it lots of little houses?
We've got
people
a
little
house
bit about what you've got.
Where we can have up to 6 women at once in the house. At the moment we have to
with
keep...
their families?
No, that's just single women that are in the house. And then
what
we
do you
can
do with
take...
the families?
We've got family units.
Oh, okay.
So we've built 6. We're building our 7th one this week. Hopefully this is going to happen.
And how big is that? How big are the units? I mean,
they're big enough that you could fit a king size bed and a set of bunks in them, or a cot as well. So they're open plan, but they've got their own bathroom, they've got their own little kitchenette, and they've got their own little yard, so they can have their clothesline, their washing machines, and their pets.
And then how long do you let them stay with you? Because I can only imagine how incredibly traumatised they are when they arrive.
Shattered.
So, yeah, absolutely. And I know you've got some stories that we'll hear later, and we'll try not to cry, but can you tell me, I didn't realise that they all had their own little yard, so how long are they actually able to stay with you for?
They can stay up to 3 months, but every now and then we get a bit of a curly one, which we've got at the moment, where we've got a lady who's got stage 4 cancer. And so I go to the board and I beg them and say, please give me permission to keep this woman longer. She's not going to be able to be out of here in 3 months. So we've had a few that have been terminal with cancer. And
still in a domestic violence situation with a partner who's beating them up in that situation.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just mind-blowing. So you bought this house, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit later. And what else do you actually do? Because I know, for instance, for anybody who's not watching it live, this week, we'll explain what happened in the Gold Coast this week and what you've done.
Yeah, we got quite upset with what's happened with Hannah and the 3 children, and many other women who were killed Australia-wide, not just on the Gold Coast or Brisbane. But when Tara was killed, Tara Brown was killed.
Yeah, just you'll have to explain some of these stories. So Tara Brown was the woman who was trying to escape from her partner, and she was on the road, and he pushed her off the road, didn't he? And then basically dragged her out of the car and killed her.
He ran her off the road, and while she was trapped in the car, caved her head in with a fire hydrant. And then the woman who was there helping thought he was trying to get her out, but then he proceeded to do horrible things. So, but when Tara died 4.5 years ago, Australia stopped and said, let's do something about domestic violence. Nothing has changed except one strangulation law. So things have to change.
God, I mean, there's been so much agitating, we see so much media around it, and yet nothing's been changed.
No, they do a big talk fest, they get lots of media involved, and then it just goes away. It dissipates within a week or two, life is normal.
Right.
I think this time Australia has had a big outcry. Australia is not coping with what's happened with Hannah.
So it's Hannah, but the stats are staggering as well, aren't they? I mean, you would probably know. What are the stats? How many women a year are in this position?
It's 9 so far this year.
9, and we're not in the end of February. 9 women killed.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about the ones who've been severely hurt, or the ones who aren't even reporting it that have been hurt. That's unbelievable. So, So very, very different from Kate's situation. I think this is going to be a really, really interesting conversation. I'm really interested in how you managed to get a house together if you didn't get government funding. What did you do?
I went to Housing Queensland and I said, can you give me a house to use of what I wanted to set up? And they said, great idea, but no. And
why was the no? Was it because of the boys and the pets?
no, hadn't even discussed that with
Right.
them. And so
Gee,
I
again,
sat on
I'm
it
amazed.
a while and thought, "Oh, what can I do? How do I do it?" And then I went to the Alison Baden Clay rally about 4.5 years
Now,
ago.
she was the wife who was killed by her husband, and he hid it for ages, didn't he?
Yeah,
Didn't-
they
he didn't
found the
get-
body a few days later, and he's now in jail for killing Alison. But it was at that rally where it was like the pivotal moment, the light bulb moment, if you like, where I just went, this is it, I've got to do something. I'm going to buy my own refuge and I'm going to start it. If the government aren't going to help, I can be the drop in the ocean to do
You
something.
are incredible. I mean, I think everybody thinks I've got to do something and I want to do something, but to put their money where their mouth is. So what did you do then?
Went and got a big loan and went and got almost $1 million mortgage to have the property, because it had to be a property where you couldn't see into the property. And I'm one of these stalkers that when I buy a property, I go there at all different times of the day and night, and I keep looking at it. And I kept trying to see if the lady was home, and I kept trying to drive up neighbours' driveways, and I couldn't see where her
Good.
car was parked. And I went, this is the property, this is it.
How big is it? What sort
It's
of land?
2.5 acres.
Oh, yeah, great.
Okay.
And we needed somewhere to have a lot of space so that the women could have their animals there. So even if we get a horse in, if we get a budgie, it doesn't matter what size the animal is, we can accommodate it. Haven't got a giraffe or a hippo yet, Jules, but never say never.
The little bit I know of you won't stop you if you decide you want one.
No. So yeah, it's a beautiful property, and we've fenced the whole property in, and we've put fences inside fences so that all the animals can live in harmony and be safe. So it doesn't matter if we've got a pit bull, a bull mastiff,
And a cat,
a
for
cat.
instance.
They can't get to each other.
great.
Everything's safe at the refuge, and
That's
we've never had an
amazing.
incident. And it's beautiful when the children come in, and that's the part that it resonates with me, that they come in and they're like, wow, it's like Jurassic Park. There's alpacas on one side, and there's ducks, and there's chooks and goats and peacocks, and we've got a sheep called Dolly that's actually a boy, but Dolly's got issues.
Okay, yeah.
But they're just beautiful, and the kids love coming into see the animals, and what should be their worst day of their life all of a sudden becomes, for some, the best day, going, wow, can we pat these
and
animals?
can we stay here and actually
Yep.
get to see them in the mornings and feed the chickens or whatever it might be?
Yeah, and they collect
that's
the
beautiful.
eggs, and there's lots of beautiful things that happen at the refuge, and there's lots of beautiful people, volunteers that come to
Right.
help out. So
Beautiful. All right. Well, I might just stop you there, because in the next part of the show, I really want to talk about how you got from whatever you started off doing to what you're doing now, and that'll give us a bit of a rationale as well. So stay tuned, and we're going to find out the journeys that these two women were on.
From Ticker, You're watching She's the Boss. Here's Jules Brooke.
Welcome back to She's the Boss. Today I have these two amazing guests, both of whom are working in very, very different fields, but this show is all about all the different types of businesses that you can run. So I'm going to start with Kate because I'm very, very interested in how you actually got to do what it is that you do now, because when I first met you, you were a journalist. So how did a journalist take that journey over the last, I guess it's nearly 15, 16 years.
Yeah, 2008.
You were very young then, weren't you? When I think about how old were you as marketing manager? As editor of Marketing Magazine?
About 24, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right. So what happened then?
So then that was around actually when Twitter was starting. So I was like getting really into social media at the same time, and then started
early adopter.
Well, no. And then I started that Social Melb, which was like a breakfast meetup for digital professionals. And so that was kind of that
I think I went to one of those actually.
Yeah, and it still ran with the help of the great community until like a few years ago. So that was really exploring like a lot of the early co-working spaces, and those kind of connections and startups came out of that original kind of internet crew that would meet. So
I remember saying, I remember the one opening a lab in Docklands, and me going, what's a lab? I've never even heard of it. And then I went startups, and I was like, what are startups?
So that kind of took me from journalism into more digital and online, and then I was the digital director of that magazine publishing company, Niche. And so from there, really wanted to go to San Francisco and get into startups, and so it was really that journey, and I started.
So you did go to San Francisco?
Yeah, and like I quit my job in 2010 and just went with, and I started trying to become a minimalist and put a lot of stuff.
Years before Marie Kondo.
Well, and then also it was a digital nomad for a couple of years, that kind of got into that.
You are so cool.
No, and then I went to San Francisco and then started working at a Y Combinator startup.
What's a Y Combinator?
So Y Combinator is probably the most prestigious startup accelerator in the world, and a company, a travel company there. So then I worked with them for a while, and then after that started my first company, The Fetch, which was a city guide for all the tech events and business events going on in Melbourne, and then that grew to 10 different cities. And then that was a small business, but while I was running that, noticed it was really hard to kind of find freelancers to help out. And there were a lot of sites that were like freelance marketplaces, but they're all about, trying people for $5, and, it was kind of, you weren't really hiring someone locally to you, it was trying to get the lowest cost possible.
Yeah.
And as a freelancer, a social media and community manager myself, I just noticed it was a gap in the market. So that's where Cloud Peeps came along as a way to...
So how does that fit with, say, a recruitment company that would get you a job in that, and Fiverr, which is, I guess, what you're talking about, Fiverr and Freelancer and Upwork and those kind of things?
Yeah, so it was more about all technology enabled. So if you've got a recruitment company, you're often still meeting with someone in person, or there's a lot of phone-based sales. Cloud Peeps was a little bit like a LinkedIn, so it's, you can go list a profile on there and then apply for jobs. And it's also all remote work, so this was one of the kind of...
So you don't have to actually know what they like, or really, as long as their qualifications are good and you get on well on the phone.
Exactly, and that was part of my ethos as well through that kind of work and travel, is that I didn't want to be going into an office, and that was kind of one of my forays into entrepreneurship, was that I didn't want to work in the 9 to 5, and I wanted that flexibility, because I would always go to an office and people would be making toast and lunch for 2 hours. I'm like, this is so unproductive, I just want to do stuff.
Plus you've got someone telling you what to do all the time, which I don't really like the idea
of.
So,
added layers and stuff that's not really focused on productivity. So that's why remote work, freelancing, flexible work, the future of work, all those trends kind of came together in Cloud Peeps. And then through that experience of starting that, raising the money, seeing what it was like to kind of play at that level, deciding that yes, this is not lifestyle businesses, because a lot of people say that, but there is this middle way of the indie way, which is you can create a scalable, profitable business that can still have a great impact, but you don't have to kind of go, okay, it's just lifestyle business, or I have to raise as much money as possible to be successful.
You can sort of sit in the middle a bit and grow it, but just it's a little bit slower, which is kind of what I've been doing with my own business.
Yeah, and a lot of these companies that raise all the money just crash and burn anyway, because when I was in San Francisco, it was the peak of the on-demand economy, so people were getting donuts on demand, massages on demand,
Right.
you know, and it was always at a loss, so the cost per acquisition, the companies were losing money or using VC money to basically fuel their growth.
Yeah.
So they kind of might look good in the short term, but their long-term unit economics aren't that great. So
Yeah.
I don't believe that slow growth is actually bad. I think that you can have really sustainable, meaningful growth and build a company for 10 years, not just 2 years and try and flip
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, while we're on the topic of funding, there's a
Yes.
perfect segue over to Simone, who I just have to say hates technology and doesn't know how to use her phone. I happen to know.
I can't.
Like, this is how you use email, Simone. So, in your instance, which is obviously the opposite of tech, how did you fund this? I'm really interested to know how you've started off funding it and how you've kept going.
Yeah, I started off working as a prison officer of all things, which is sort
Wow,
of
what a
total
great
opposite end of the
I love it,
spectrum
journalist
to what I'm
for this,
doing
and now
now.
we've got prison officer. So
Yeah.
what was that like as a woman?
It was terrible. I started off
That's
in
exactly what I expected you to say.
in women's jails at Mullewa in Silverwater, and then went to men's jails, which were actually a lot easier
Were they?
in some respects to work in. And then I went into maximum men's security jails, medium, and I ended up working in the dog squad, where you train dogs to go in and find drugs.
Oh, you would have loved that with the pets.
Of course, of course. And that was my big way into what I'm doing now, and seeing how you can keep dogs that could literally rip each other to pieces next to each other without harming any of them. And that's the
Right.
principle I've put in at the refuge. And there was quite a few funny stories, and there was Eddie the Eagle, who was found, I was doing a cell search, and I went into one of the Banditos bikie cells,
As you
and
do.
and he wouldn't let me in, and he said, "You're not getting in," and I said, "Get out the way, I'm doing a cell search." And going toe to toe with one of these guys, they're not the guys you muck around with.
No.
Cut a long story short, I got my way into the cell, and I pulled back the shower curtain, and there's an eagle sitting there, and I just went,
Wow.
Have you
Yeah.
smuggled an
an
eagle?
eagle in here. Anyway, so
Did
we
you
got.
ever find out how it got in there?
Oh, of course, we sat down and talked long and hard about how it got there, how
And
they
how-
did it.
to stop
But
it
the eagle
happening
was
again.
really sick, and
Yeah,
they got
right.
it off the golf course at Parklea Prison, and we ended up getting it over to Wires, which then, of course, I became a carer of wildlife for years with Wires and Native Animal Trust Fund up at Nelson Bay. But I guess I worked always in welfare community services after there, because I studied while I was a prison officer and did community services, and all my prison officer friends said, "You're going to the dark side, you can't be a wally welfare, you can't care." And it was right on the cusp when Corrective Services New South Wales was going to unit management, and so I loved
So
what I was
does
doing.
unit management
Unit
mean?
management.
They were going to get rid of a whole lot of staff?
It
Is
was
that what you
from
mean, or-
the bad old days of flog 'em, lock 'em up, keep them locked
Oh
away.
yeah, we don't care. We're not going to rehabilitate.
And in the early 90s, they said, this isn't working, what's working in America is better. We went to America, we looked at what the American jails were doing, and I was there in 1990, and their jails were so much better and years ahead of ours. And so we came back and went, wow, you know, what they're doing is better. So Australia implemented the American way, which of course we do 10 years later. But I started working in community services, and that's where I think I found my niche, and I loved it. And I was started out in women's refuges and in different areas where working with kids in out of home care and mental health, drug and alcohol, and I loved it. So for
You're
me,
really making a big difference, I guess, to people's
yeah, you
lives.
are, and it's people who want to change and want to get out of situations
And just
they're
need
in.
that leg up.
Yep, they do. They just need the hand up to say, you know what, I've got to get out. I've got to stay safe.
So you took your own savings or whatever it was, I don't know, and bought a house.
Yeah.
And that was 4 years ago. So how do you keep it going?
It's been tough. It's been very
On the
tough.
smell of an oily rag?
Yes, a few times it's almost busted, and I've got beautiful people, and Amanda Vella has just done a fundraiser for us, and it's people like her, and I've got a beautiful range of people, but one of the best would have to be Fight Like a Pro, Gavin Top.
Yeah.
He helps me non-stop, and the first day we had
How does he help you? Sorry, can I just ask first?
He runs Fight Like a Pro, which is a group of men who get together, and at the end of their 10-week challenge they have a fight night, and it's boxing of all things, helping a refuge, which I hate boxing.
But you know, it's a great way for guys in particular to get that aggression out in a safe way and learn to hit in an inanimate object rather than a person.
And
or
they're
an animal.
taught to journal, they're taught to talk about things that guys don't talk about, which is the way forward. And if we could just get this into schools and get kids and young boys especially, that is the way forward for domestic violence. That's the key, that's the ticket to stop grown men hurting and lashing out and not being able to talk about their feelings. But we need a Royal Commission into domestic violence for what's going on. It's horrendous. But I always dabbled in real estate and bought and sold properties. And once you make over $1 million, you go, well, yeah, I can make 2, I can make 3. But my passion has always been to help people. So I thought, if I buy a property, I can really help people. So that's what I did. And it's grown, and so Fight Like a Pro, they come out, they do all the building work, they've put up fencing right around the property.
So these are the young guys
that
he's working with are actually out there helping your women and their families.
Some start at 18, some go up to 70. It just depends. But they're men on their journey to be better men, better fathers, better husbands, better people in society.
I kind of also love the fact that you've got the guys who are trying to recover themselves in some ways, along with these women as well, because I just think that's a really lovely kind of, I don't know, fit.
A lot of beautiful businessmen that want to change and want to help others, and the first time we had them out, one of the women said, these guys could all hurt us, they're all trained boxers. And I thought, yes, this is correct. And it was a gamble, Jules. It was a big gamble whether it was going to work. It did work, and it's still working 4 years later, that these beautiful men come out and help the women, and they're role models of this is what men can do.
Yeah. And I think in particular that you've also got young boys there who've grown up with a violent father or a violent partner in the home. So it's a great example for them as well, that guys don't have to be like that.
They follow them around like lost puppies.
They don't get exposure to men like that.
We've got little kids that want the red shirts like the Fight Like a Pro guys that go around and they're digging holes and they go, I can help, and they go get their little shovels and they come along and help. So it's a beautiful fit for what's going on, and we do want to show that not all men hit, not all men hurt. That there's beautiful men out there that come together and help us.
I just want more of them to be like Gavin. You know, I'd just like more of them to be out there being vocal
need a world
and actually
of Gavs.
helping. But look, now listen quickly, just to bring it back again to business and how in heaven's name you are funding this. You told me a great story recently about going down to Sydney and a meeting got cancelled. So tell me what happened there, because really, you know, when I had first met you, which is a while ago, because we have to admit, I have met Simone now about a year ago, you were desperate for funding and you were going, we don't need it. And I said to you, but there's all these big corporate businesses out there that are definitely slicing off a portion of their profits and putting it into funding and fundraising and donating to charities. Why aren't you tapping into that? So what did you do about it? Because I love this story.
So earlier this week I was in Sydney for a court case for a client, and the court was adjourned, and I thought, 2 days in Sydney, what do I do? And so I went round knocking on doors of big companies in Sydney and said, I need help, I need the hand
No, but
up.
tell me literally how you did it, because I think that's the best bit.
I went and just printed up some flyers in the library in Sydney, and then I went and knocked on doors and
Went
said,
to the receptionist and said, let me
Yep.
speak to the CEO.
or the marketing manager or managing director.
And how successful is that? Because that is really, isn't that really brave? I think
It's going well. People have got back to me saying, you know what, we want to help. We can't help this year, but next year.
Fantastic.
And they said something that you could have knocked me over with a feather. They said people don't come round. We don't get CEOs of charities coming knocking on our door. And I said, well, I need help. And if you don't help me, I could be closed down. I could lose funding. I have no more money to keep putting into it. And so for me, I went away going, wow, I should have listened to Jules a year ago.
I don't mean from that point of view. I just mean, it's all well and good to talk about the theory of things, but for you to actually have gone down to reception and you said that you had said to them, I need to speak to the CEO, and they went, who are you? And sorry, they're incredibly busy. And you went, I need to speak to the CEO or someone now.
Yeah.
And I think you also said with a couple of them, they said, no, our head office is in Melbourne or our head office is in Brisbane. And you went, get me an appointment at the head office and I'll come down. So I think that's fantastic. And I really do believe that there's a lot of corporates, and you probably have more experience about this than I do, Kate, but they've got these massive profits. They do have to invest back. And if they don't know, they're going to go to the obvious ones. They'll go to the Breast Cancer Foundation, they'll do Movember, they'll do a big organisation. And really, I think what would really tug on their heartstrings and make it much more real for them is to help someone like you, a real person who needs funding for a real situation, and this is the difference it's made.
The problem is, when we've applied for every grant we could in the 4 years, but we get knocked back on a lot. Some we can't even apply for because you need 50,000 or 250,000 in your trust account, and it's like, we've never had that much money the whole time we've been going.
I just have to bring that back now to funding for startups, because what you're saying now is something that really grinds my goat about investors, which is when your business is earning $1 million, that's when we'll invest. And you go, oh my God, when I'm earning $1 million, I'm not going to need your investment, So do you think that is going to change at some stage, or is?
Well, I think it depends on the caliber of the angel investors. So in Australia, you might say, I need money, and then you're going and approaching really like venture capitalists, which aren't the right stage for someone who might write you a $25,000 check. So chatting to the right investor is the best use of your time.
So can you take us through a little bit how the investors work? Because you obviously know that ecosystem quite well.
Well, there's usually stages in venture capital, or raising money. So you might have something that's a friend and family round to begin with.
Which is the first one. They often say your mum might do it, or your sister, or your best friend.
Or you might even, crowd fund an initial
so
kind
sort of Possible or Kickstarter.
50 or 100K or something. Then you might look at a pre-seed round or an angel round where that could be $250,000 to even $2 million. A lot of people have large angel rounds now.
But you can do that with no customers, with an idea, really,
well, that's kind of a bit of misnomer, because a lot of people think that anyone can go raise money. But looking at the people who can raise money that have no traction and they have no revenue, often they've had a background where they've had track records. So, I've worked with people who've created some of the top websites in the world, and they literally can walk in and say, look, I want 25 million for my next project. But it's very rare for someone to raise nowadays from a lack of, if they've got no traction. But there are different things that you can raise on. So you can raise on traction, or you can raise on social proof, or you can raise on your community and reputation. So it's kind of picking something that you know is working. But one of the things which, to just tout the indie way again, but is that there's a whole no-code movement now. So a lot of in tech entrepreneurship, a lot of female founders or minority founders, if they weren't from an engineering background, they weren't able to build their startups. So they're like, I need to raise 100K to go put into a website. But now you can actually do a lot with a very little. So you can do a lot yourself and then start to get that early revenue and then retain ownership, or when you are raising, have a lot more behind you to go. So you're not raising to go and, I need to hire these people. You're raising going, okay, I've already got something that works a little bit already, and if with this amount of money I can expand it. So Yeah, so I think it's different. And then if you need a lot of different funding in grant space, Queensland have got a lot of grants, but it's often based around entrepreneurship. I feel so
and technology and stuff
almost like shallow talking, sitting next to you, where it's like
well, I always knew it was going to be an interesting conversation with all of us as well. I mean, I feel like that
but
too.
It's a shame that they're not kind of investing
well,
in
you would think,
domestic violence and technology and seeing how you can marry them together to.
It's
to
really
make
interesting, and maybe with the huge hoo-ha that has come around about Hannah and that absolutely awful situation she was in, and I noticed certainly through social media, women I think are being much more vocal this time around. Each time it just gets. Each time you just kind of go, I cannot believe this has happened again.
And with the bushfire funding as well, there's been a lot of anti-large charity backlash because, it's not going to the people on the ground.
That $100 million that we all donated still hasn't got to anyone.
So I think hopefully that will cause people to wake up and say, we're going to put it into smaller non-profits and charities and foundations because we want the impact to be seen.
Okay, so we'll have another break now. On the way back, when we come back, I think it'd be really nice for us to talk about what we've learned along the way, setting up budget, things that we would do again, things that maybe we would stay away from. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes and we'll find out what sorts of things we could do or not do to get to where we are today.
This is Ticker.
From Ticker, you're watching She's the Boss. Here's Jules Brooke.
Welcome back to She's the Boss. I've got the great Kate Kendall here from Indie Labs and Cloud Peeps, and Simone McEwen from the Sanctuary Refuge for Women, Children and Pets. I have to remember to say all of that bit of it. So we've now been doing our thing for a while. I'm really interested. I'm going to start with you, Simone. What have you learned along the way? Have there been things that you would do again? And have there been things that you've gone, wow, I never should have done that in the first place, or I wish I hadn't done it? Because I'm sure we all have those moments. Have you got any advice for any of our viewers about, things that have worked for you?
Yeah, it's a great thing to start up a charity, but anyone who's thinking of it, I would say get the funding first.
Right.
Get the big companies backing you before you do it, because I thought the government would come in and help, and that hasn't happened, and it's been one big, long, hard struggle that has been financial, emotional, physically, really difficult on my whole family and friends who are watching me struggle each day.
I wonder though, I guess I wonder to myself, if you had got the funding beforehand, would it be the business that it is today? Because if you had gone out with, and as you said, in those days you weren't thinking about having boys and having pets and things, you were just thinking of starting a charity. If you'd got that funding, I wonder whether it would have taken you in a different direction, and that they might have sort of said, well, we'll give you funding, but we prefer you do it this way, or we prefer you do that way. It's interesting.
It's been a really big thing for me. I knew it wasn't going to be just a normal refuge in the burbs. I knew it was going to be boys over 12 and pets, because that was one of the big flaws I've seen
in the system,
the residentials I've worked in, that you can't bring your pets, and they're smuggling boys in cars at night to smuggle them into refuges.
I mean, what does actually, and I know this is slightly off track, but what does a woman do if she's got young boys and she's not able to get into a refuge? What are they doing?
They go back. They stay.
They go back to the...
They will couch surf for a few days, and then once they realise there's no one out there to help,
they go back.
They either get in touch with me and beg, say, I'll put up a tent, I'll sleep in my car, please just let me in. And it's a really hard thing. It's one of my hardest things every day, struggling to decide which woman to let in. And you know that if you pick it wrong, she could be killed tonight.
God. And roughly how many requests do you get a week? So
I turn away 15 to 20 every day.
Every day?
Wow.
Every day. And since Hannah was killed last week, I have double. I don't even get to return most of my phone calls, and I'm so sorry for those people. I don't get to call you back. I don't get to reply. It's just me, and
that's right. You can only do what you can do. You're one human being, you know.
Yeah.
Like that, you can't beat yourself up. Think about all the good things you're doing.
Yeah.
But boy, oh boy, does it open it up to, you know, why in heaven's name that something hasn't changed. So, what about you, Kate? Are there things along the way that you wish you'd done differently, or that you learned a lot of good or bad things from?
Yeah, I think there's always plenty of things you do.
Anything
Where do I
that stands
start?
out.
So, but I think the biggest thing is just really being authentic to yourself. I think that there's a lot of times that, you know, I was like, oh, I have to live here, or I have to go be in Silicon Valley or do that. And now I live in, you know, a regional area, and it's really peaceful. So, and you know,
and back in Australia, thank goodness we got you back.
And but you can still connect, you know, with people globally and work locally. So I like that. But I think there was definitely you must be this, and this is a definition of success. And there's a newspaper or an online blog called TechCrunch, which was kind of dominating the psychology of tech, what it means to be successful, and it's all funding announcements. So, and even today,
I'm just going to guess, and I guess I'm probably being really sexist with this, but I bet it's run mainly by blokes, is it?
Well, the whole like culture of Silicon Valley, they often call it like brotopia,
which is really weird, isn't it? That women aren't jumping into that space.
Yeah, and I think even recently it's still going down. Like women in tech it's not increasing. So I think there's a lot of exit of that as well, where people get in there and then they're getting to the top, or and then they're realizing, oh, this is not what I thought it would be. So I think for me it's just about creating your own path and listening a lot more to your gut and going, this is what I want and this is how I want to operate. And I think that's the next generation of female founders as well. Like, you don't have to go and find the technical co-founder if that's what, you know, an investor says you must have a technical co-founder, or you have to go and you know, you're servicing like period underwear. That's not a market. Like there's a lot of
and they do a lot of that.
Yeah,
I mean, even with my business, I remember going to an investor and he went, PR? PR is easy. You're like, what are you even talking about? Anyone could do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
this is funny because I always say, because of the marketing mag background, there were a lot of female marketers. Yeah. But now it's, I joke that it's been reinvented as growth hacking, because men can get paid a lot of money to be a growth hacker, and then it's like PR marketing woman kind of thing. So,
isn't that funny?
You know, you do see it a bit like that. So I think... do
you think Australia's following the same trend? Do you think? Because I personally, I mean, I know the stat that I read, I think it came out of the ABS last year, or might have been the year before, was that the number of businesses that are being started now, 56% of them are by women.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes,
Well,
bring it
and
on. So I don't know whether that's Australia or if that's...
there is a lot of women starting businesses, but I would classify those as often small businesses.
Yes.
But that's because they need to
trying
have
to run a family.
or they need to be shown that you can take a small business, create it into a scalable tech startup. So if you're someone who, like in your case, you are a PR professional, but then you could handle your own PR and then package like PR in a box, and then all of a sudden you've got this. It's not a consultancy.
And it becomes a tech startup.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what a lot of female founders can be shown, that yes, you can think about this in a scalable way and reach a lot more people and build it up. It doesn't have to be a small business.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's any message I'd love anyone to take out of this, is that you don't feel that it's too scary to give it a go, because it isn't. And I mean, I love this show because we get to see all these amazing women doing incredible things. And whether it's tech or non-tech.
Very much non-tech here.
But you were saying earlier, I heard you in the break say to Kate, what kind of tech startups are happening at the moment? Can you answer that? Are there trends?
Well, I think the thing about tech is it's now so ubiquitous.
Prevalent,
it's everywhere. Like, we're in a co-working space full of tech startups at the moment where we're shooting. And so it's just all over where you're seeing tech is reaching every industry, even with fundraising. So there's been the rise of equity crowdfunding in Australia. There's sites like GoFundMe. So there's a lot more ways that you can use technology to kind of get what you need.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I'm noticing in terms of a trend, I think, is this sort of social conscience, social justice environment.
Totally, yeah.
So the younger kids that are coming in now are going, I don't want a business for the sake of having a business anymore.
Yeah.
I want to have a business that makes a difference. So which could really work in
Absolutely.
your favour, because I do think that there will be teens who saw what happened last week who'll be heading into the workforce going, I'm not going to let that happen again. Or they've come from a background where there's been violence, and they go, they'll put their very clever brains to that kind of a topic. And it would be really interesting to see if they can kind of try and solve this in some way.
Well, we're seeing that with environment, with Fridays for the Future and Greta Thunberg as well, right?
Isn't
it's like
she
create this whole
amazing
movement and get the next generation to actually step up where the politicians might be letting us down.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I guess when I look back to my era, and I'm probably going to show my age now, it was all stop the drop. We had loads of fears around nuclear war and nuclear disarmament. So I'm really interested to see, as this generation grows up, whether this is just a sort of a generational thing that they all reach that age, they get agitate around it for a while, something happens, and then we get a new topic, or whether this is something that's actually going to carry through.
I think it will definitely stay, because there's just a lack of security now for this next generation. It's not like you've got the 25-year career and
the gold watch at the end.
And the real estate, it's just, I think there is a lot of disgruntledness because there isn't that future, and that's why people are like, we want to focus on these causes, because if we don't, we won't have the same future.
And all these startups, more and more so, are becoming incredibly niche, which I love as well. How to deliver milk to people in such and such, or a certain type of product that becomes what you would think would only appeal to a small group of people, but in the same way that you do marketing and all the rest of it, that you target on that niche and you get your message right, and then it will resonate. Now we can go global, so you can go small market or small niche, but actually I could do that niche in every single country around the world, all from sitting in my little desk in Melbourne and playing around on my laptop, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
So anything that has happened along the way that you regret doing, that you wish you had done differently? Or and let me put this out to both of you, because I don't want to put you on the spot. Is there something that you, Kate, can think of that would be useful for somebody else to know, to avoid doing?
I think I tended to try and hire a lot of people to fix problems. As a founder, you're like, okay, well, I'll find this person or this person, and that will be the answer. But sometimes you just have to keep rolling your sleeves up and figuring it out as well. And so learning how to hire, I think.
That's
properly.
Really interesting, because when I was building my my platform, the guy I was working with at the time was like, you don't try and do everything yourself, because that's my natural instinct. You actually need to go and find experts, because you might as well have something executed at 9 out of 10, or otherwise don't bother doing it. And I've always had the attitude where you could start at 4 and work your way up to 9 by learning yourself.
But I think you really need to know your customers and be super hands-on with getting that product market fit. And it's hard, if you're a female founder, you might not know how to code. So you're like, let me go get an IT agency or someone to like fix this, but it's
and
really
no IT agency is ever going to go, we don't know how to do it. They
they always say,
we've
here's
got
your
the solution.
you need all these features, you
Yeah.
know. So at the end of the day, I think it's just, you know, pick up your phone to your customers, really get to see what their problems are, and then
really
solve
good
it in,
advice.
like you were saying, the niche to win approach.
Yeah. And what about you, Simone? Have you got anything?
I have no regrets in life. I think you've just got to get in
Good
and
woman.
do what you want to do in life, because life's so short that if you don't take the plunge sometimes and do crazy stuff like start up a charity with no funding,
Yes.
I think it's taken me on a journey I would never have gone on, and it's given me so much strength, and I meet beautiful people like you guys. And along the way, there's so many people who've helped prop me up and keep me going on those bad days. But I wish I'd have studied more, and I wish I'd have studied harder at school and
Why?
gone straight
What
to
do you
uni,
think the difference
because
that would have made?
I think it puts you in a different pathway, definitely, and
Maybe it gives you
possibly
a confidence.
an
that-
easier pathway than the way I've done it.
I don't know whether it actually practically applies, but I do think it gets your head in a difference, and you end up maybe with a lot more confidence or belief that
Yeah.
you can do something.
Well, actually,
What
that
would
was
you
my
say, Kate?
regret, because I did a Bachelor of Science in microbiology and biotechnology.
Incredibly useful.
And you're using that every day.
Totally. And
Clearly.
then I did a Master of Business in Marketing, and I think if I would have had the confidence to just go from school into entrepreneurship, I could have not, you know, had all that money or time, or just kind of going, I should finish this. You need a degree. And now a lot of big graduate programs and consulting companies, they don't even require a degree anymore.
No, which is really funny, because there was a stage, many years ago, I remember when everyone was coming out of uni and there were no jobs, so everyone was getting second and third degrees.
Yeah.
And you'd be kind of like, so when are you going to actually go out and do something in the world
Yeah.
that will make a difference? And maybe this entrepreneur thing is...
You stand out more without a degree and maybe a startup now than, you know,
Yeah.
I've got 2 or 3 degrees. So.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
All right, well, listen, you've both been amazing guests. Thank you so much. Let's just tell everyone how people can find the refuge, particularly if anybody out there is looking for somewhere to put their charity dollars for the next year. This would be a really good cause for it. How do people get in touch with you? Is the website the best way?
We've got a website, we've got
What's the
Facebook.
website address?
The website is www.sanctuaryrefuge.com.au.
Great.
And I know something about tech, guys. that was huge for me. And on Facebook, of course, the Sanctuary Women, Children and Pets Refuge, or Retreat for Kids Inc.
Okay.
So there's 2 ways, and call me. if
Yeah,
you'd like to
and she
help
is
out.
actually on LinkedIn as well.
Yes, LinkedIn.
Not all the time, but she's on LinkedIn. And Kate, how can people get hold of you?
Well, usually just at Kate Kendall on most of the channels. So
Yeah.
apart from TikTok, I was too old for that, so I've got an R in there now. But katekendall.com.
And via socials the best way?
Yeah,
or-
and I've got links to the businesses and the founders I support and stuff from there. So yeah, that would be
Fantastic.
great.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today with these 2 fabulous women, both doing things so completely different, but I kind of loved the fact that we all got to talk about it. I hope you've enjoyed the show. My name is Jules Brooke, and I will look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week.
This is Ticker, your new source for news.